Against Architecture is by Franco La Cecla. Translated in 2012, La Cecla is an Italian anthropologist and architect. He is highly critical of the current state of the profession, particularly the archistars, and the lack of social responsibility of most architects. Key themes presented in the text are social responsibility in relation to architecture, discussion of archistars, and the importance of the image in the city. Finally, La Cecla presents the idea of what would form a perfect city, in his opinion.
A key aspect of social responsibility is that of equality. He presents the example of the systematic destruction of the slums in areas such as Mumbai. Tractors and bulldozers were sweeping away the miserable hovels with people in front of them. Buildings are constructed for the wealthy and the powerful who do not want to live overlooking the slums. Since they own the land, they dictate what happens, regardless of those who occupy the land. He is critical of the client, yet sympathetic with the architect, Renzo Piano, in his failed project to build a new campus for Columbia in Harlem, New York. Rather than engaging the unique local community, as Piano and particularly La Cecla wanted to, Columbia sought to clean up. They are paying off locals to pass their proposals at the detriment of the communities. Columbia marginalised Piano and used his name and reputation of caring about the local culture before employing a puppet architect, SOM, who are infamous for being the most obedient planners in the city.
Franco talks about the rise of a subtopia and the inequality that can be found as you move from the centre to the outskirts, harshly referring to it as constituting a plague. He blames this rise of this subtopia on architects and planners, not archistars, believing they have not changed their scale of values to the modern day, which can be found in Western Europe, but mostly Africa, Asia and Latin America. Franco merely explains a point of view not founded on any solid evidence.
La Cecla defines public architecture as placing the resources of architecture in the service of the public interest. He idealises the concept of function over form, insisting that architecture should solve practical problems of human interaction in the built environment.
La Cecla is against archistars, those famous for their prominent designs. The archistar does not work for fashion, he has become a fashion, with the brand, the logo, a warranty of power to sign part of the city. He feels the role of an architect should be to design with the public interest in mind. He argues that if your city transforms itself into a logo, sooner or later it is better if you go and live somewhere else. The city loses its identity through the logo and becomes somewhat of an image to please tourists and compete with other cities.
Franco was involved in a project in Barcelona, the process of the redevelopment of Sagrera, with a focus on citizens and their reactions. In a letter to Ace Bilo, who was in charge of the planning for the development of the city, regarding Franco's opinions on what was observed within Barcelona, Franco wrote, "The conglomeration of houses and apartment buildings and the most beautiful monuments and the best architecture don't make up a city, but are simply a lifeless skeleton. It is the people that give the city its soul." In essence, a city can only exist with the inhabitants of the people, and it is the people which animate the city. Franco addresses the suburban phenomenon of cities, which he originally described as an inhuman atmosphere, yet which lead to the suburbs being the true centres of cities due to the interweaving of neighbourhood relationships, which are imposed of the architecture in place. What I think Franco is getting at is how people are taking possession of their environment and redefining spatial constraints of its architecture. By attention of organisations, artists and media groups to the suburbs, it is put forward that it has become the true centre where the vitality is.
Franco discusses the role and position of the suburb, leading us to believe that it is the ugliness and insignificance of the inhabitants. Despite Boari and Gregotti stating in Soul 24 that there was no need to attach blame to the planners, and in fact the root is political, not architectural. Franco insists that the architects played an intrinsic role before the first rock was thrown in the Parisian riots due to their responsibility as apostles of the suburban solution, which they concluded was best suited to escape of high-rise apartment blocks outside the city. He references two films which he believes encapsulate the frustration provoked by the insensitivity to daily life expressed in the plans of the famous and not so famous architects.
C'est l'histoire d'un homme qui tombe d'un immeuble de 50 étages. Le mec, au fur et à mesure de sa chute, il se répète sans cesse pour se rassurer. Jusqu'ici, tout va bien. Jusqu'ici, tout va bien. Jusqu'ici, tout va bien. Mais l'important, c'est pas la chute. C'est l'atterrissage.
The checklist theory is important as he is challenging what the future role of an architect should be. This could be influential in shifting the role of an architect towards becoming socially responsible city planners who observe, analyse and decipher the social impact of building projects they design, as opposed to designing signature buildings. La Cecla uses vague references to history, particularly to describe the changing role of an architect since World War II, from urban planners to designers of random architectural sculptures. The text consists of 7 chapters, the first of which gives an overview of La Cecla's argument, which develops over the chapters, citing other texts and life experiences as his self-proclaimed evidence. Throughout the text, Franco gives a narrative with an aim to persuade the reader to follow his unsubstantiated line of argument. He uses forceful phrases in an attempt to sway the reader to his form of thinking, a method which is quite effective after a first read. On top of this, the use of short, sharp statements or a question at the beginning of a chapter establishes his bold stance for the rest of the text, dragging the reader along with his assumptions.
The entirety of the text revolves around Franco's opinions, with little substance reinforcing his claims, led by narratives in an effort to convince the reader. When he quotes, he lacks subjectivity at times. This quote is taken out of context when Stalin was specifically calling writers engineers of human souls. This persuasive method offers an interpretation in sympathy with the people in question, due to his anthropological roots. This take on events widens our perspective in this aspect, letting us come to our own conclusion based on our own observations of the text and life experiences.
The text is starting a conversation which needs to be had, reasoning with the reader the value of architecture in the modern day.